Welcome into the Wiltfong Whiparound with Steve Wiltfong. It's a big...
I'm so pumped to be in studio with you, Joshua. It's the day after Jared Curtis, baby.
Man, it is a big day in Nashville. Yesterday was a big day in Nashville. Today's a big day in Nashville because this guy's still here. He was here for the Jared Curtis announcement, the number one quarterback in America at Nashville Christian High School, committed to Georgia over Oregon yesterday. My guy Steve was on the ground. We're going to talk all about it. But first, guys, hit that subscribe button to the On3 Recruits channel. We are buzzing over here. Lots to talk about, and it's only getting busier. So, Steve, let's get into it. Jared Curtis, what are the Dogs getting in five-star quarterback Jared Curtis?
Well, I talked to one prominent college offensive coordinator yesterday that comped him to Josh Allen with his size and play style. He's a 6'4", 225-pound ferocious specimen there under center, but he's really accurate with the football, completed 70% of his passes, threw for 40 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. Josh sees the field well, accurate to all levels, can throw the hell out of that deep ball. And then he added 18 more rushing scores, about 700 yards rushing. Georgia has been recruiting him since he was a freshman. So the traits have always been there. They've had him in camp. He can really spin it. He can make all the throws, and he is very competitive. Obviously, the competition level that he plays against is very, very low. But from a trait standpoint, seeing him in camp, and Georgia's seen all the other top quarterbacks and some of the other schools. This guy was absolutely coveted. Again, a Josh Allen comp. Charles Power, our director of scouting, compares him to Matthew Stafford, but he was the Tennessee Gatorade Player of the Year, state champion, Mr. Football. He's already thrown 92 touchdown passes in his career. He's rushed for 38 more scores. And he's excited to get to Georgia and get to work under Mike Bobo and company.
Commits to Georgia for the second time. So, Steve, want to get kind of a behind-the-scenes feel. What was it like being at Nashville Christian yesterday, knowing that he had 2 commitment videos ready to go? One was set for Oregon, one was set for Georgia. There really was this sense of, hey, this is getting closer than most people feel. Give us a behind-the-scenes feel.
And while that was the message out of the camp, I don't know if he filmed 2 videos or not, but I would say that when he decommitted from Georgia in the fall, Oregon became the team to beat pretty quickly after that, which I think even surprised the folks at Oregon. So it's like, we better ramp this thing up here. We're going to start recruiting Jared Curtis, and obviously they had gotten him to campus beforehand and there was a relationship and stuff, but I think just their reputation, what they've done with quarterbacks and offense under Will Stein and Dan Lanning, it immediately appealed to him amongst other things. So Oregon ramped it up in the fall. It was a back and forth between Georgia and Oregon. And Jared Curtis even reaching out in February to me, telling me Georgia will not be beat. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe they will be beat, But in the end, I think over the last few weeks, I did that best guess article a week from last Thursday and had Georgia for Jared Curtis. I felt good about Georgia's chances, but you just never sleep on Oregon when you're having these final conversations, your representation's having these final conversations. But I think Georgia really ratcheted it up in all the off-field infrastructure areas that they needed to. He always loved the program on the field, thinks they'll be right back winning national championships soon. Proximity to home, proximity to family. He's got a brand new nephew that was right front and center at the press conference with his sister, his parents. They were all excited to unveil the Georgia gear, and he told them on Friday night. I mean, he said in his press conference that he made his final decision on Monday, but he actually told his family
the
on
night
Sunday.
before. Yeah.
So there's always some recruiting gamesmanship, but he told his family on Sunday, wear Georgia gear. And then ultimately told Coach Lanning, Coach Stein 20 minutes before the press conference that he was going to be a dog. And so he is at Georgia, committed to the Bulldogs, and they skyrocketed to number 7 in the On3 industry recruiting rankings. I believe they were number 20 before.
No, they went from 17 to 7 yesterday.
Okay,
so outside the top 10, I mean, they weren't even sniffing the top 10. Now in there at number 7, not only do they fall into number 7, but Oregon was currently 7. They bump Oregon to 8. I mean, Oregon had been sitting at number 1 overall for a while.
I know we're doing a live show, but I just
great news from Jackson Cantwell. We will see. There'll be more on that. Thank you, Steve. Let's talk a little bit about that move from 17 to 7, because now the Dogs are in play for the number 1 class in America. Steve, they're not going anywhere, and we got Jackson Cantwell deciding a week from today.
We're
texting with him now, maybe on this channel. Jackson Cantwell, a week from today. What's going on this weekend in Athens, though?
Well, he'll be on campus.
Right.
And if you saw our interview with Jared Curtis after he committed our one-on-one, go to the On3 Recruits channel, hit like and subscribe, and watch our one-on-one with Jared Curtis. I said, Jared, are you going to be in Athens this weekend for Jackson Cantwell's visit? He's like, I didn't even know he was going to be there, but I am
I
there.
am, yeah.
So he'll be there. Well, I mean, we'll see. I mean, he just said he'd be there, but
I think I couldn't. I mean, I'm sure he'll be there. But
all right.
One more thing about before we get into Oregon fans have to feel a little bit more understanding after watching that press conference, understanding the family ties. Like, it would have been really hard. You said he had a new nephew sitting in the front row. You saw the family there. You saw his mom and how much it means to him to have Jared, or to her to have Jared close. It just wasn't in the cards for Oregon with distance, was it?
I think it just shows you the chops that Oregon has on the trail, the reputation they have with kids, the meaningful relationships. I mean, Coach Stein, what he does offensively, but then how he connects with his top targets off the field, it really means something to him, and it means something to these kids and their families. And, like, there's no question Jared Curtis's parents wanted Jared. I should say his mom. I guess I don't theoretically know what his dad wanted, but his mom wanted him to go to Georgia, but she stamped Oregon because of just the way Dan Lanning and Will Stein went about their approach, their visits to campus, the comfort level, how they made him feel at home. But this kid's a Southern boy right here, and he is SEC-styled personality quarterback, and he's going to go play for Georgia and take his shot there under center for Mike Bobo, Kirby Smart and company. And whoever they have under center, man, you're going to probably be playing in the biggest games in the sport week in and week out. And have a chance to win a national championship. That's what Jared Curtis wants. He says he's got a long way to go, but Mike Bobo's been doing it a long time. He's excited to learn from Mike Bobo. And the funny, like Jared Curtis walks over to do his one-on-one with us, and he just points over to his sister who's got Mike Bobo on FaceTime. He's just showing Mike Bobo around, So, look, I mean, it's Georgia.
There's a lot of ties.
Just a lot of excitement about that decision. Proximity to away games.
Right.
Now Oregon, they were going to make the games happen for the Curtis family, but you still got to get to the airport.
Got to take 2 flights. I mean, living here in Nashville, you're not flying to Portland, Oregon on one trip.
Right.
You got to connect somewhere. So, in the end, it's the Dogs, and he said something interesting to you, Jared Curtis, on his ability to recruit. No, I haven't been recruiting because I didn't want to tell anyone where I was going. But now that I'm a Dog, I'm going to recruit. So who are some of the top targets you could see Jared Curtis kind of focusing on now that he is officially on the commit list for the Dogs?
Well, obviously he had been talking to Jackson Cantwell a little bit. So that was one where they were kind of living the same. Like Jared Curtis's decision was this week, Jackson Cantwell's next week. They could relate to each other.
Same kind of
2
school,
5 stars, arguably
schedule.
the top prospect in the country for both of them, and looking at the same schools as you said, Oregon, Georgia. Now Miami is in the mix for Jackson Cantwell, and then he also has Michigan, Ohio State, Missouri rounding out his top 6. But we think that's coming down to the Bulldogs and Miami. And Oregon, obviously.
Yeah.
So they talked a little bit about it. I think that they have talked about, look, you come, I'm interested in you playing the Curtis camp, saying I'm interested in you playing, protecting my blind side, basically, right? So they've had some of that dialogue, but they're making independent decisions.
Sure.
And if Jared Curtis would have picked Oregon yesterday, I still would feel really good about Georgia's chances to land Jackson Cantwell. Now they got to get it home. Yeah. He's still having dialogue with these other programs, his representation, his family. They're talking to Miami, Oregon, and Georgia. But Georgia's the program that has been the front runner, in my opinion, for much of Jackson Cantwell's process. And it starts with Stacy Searles, the offensive line coach, who's just done a fantastic job recruiting him. They've really connected. That's the kind of guy he could see himself being coached by. His track record of development, Georgia's track record of development at the offensive line, the caliber of players they put on the field, the players coach that Kirby Smart is, just being around that program, he loves it. And I think that Georgia is in gear more than ever from an infrastructure standpoint, which is allowing them to I mean, look, they're looking for their 10th straight top 3 recruiting class, so we're not feeling sorry for Georgia at any level, but I think that they've really ramped it up, so other schools should be a little worried about that because now Georgia is checking all the boxes on the trail to be as competitive as they want to be across the board for their top targets. But Jackson Cantwell visiting this weekend. Always loves being at Georgia. It was really a school that he didn't need to visit again because he had been there so much. He needed to get to Miami for a spring practice. He wanted to check out Ohio State and Michigan for spring practices, and then Oregon's spring game. And then he's been to Missouri a bunch. He went to a basketball game there. The family ties. His dad's in the Hall of Fame. But Georgia, he's just going back. He could give the tour himself, man.
I know.
He's so familiar with the program and knows everything about it. But it'll be nice to just get in person, like it is for us to be in person here for the Wiltfong Whiparound. Sometimes that is just nice, and he's going to take one last visit to Georgia. But when he put out his original commitment date, I think he was going to go to Miami. So
yeah,
I think
that was the buzz for sure.
So I think Oregon and Georgia have rallied. And I think Georgia, I like where Georgia's at, but we'll know for sure next week, and we'll see what this visit's like this weekend in Athens.
Yeah, I'm not saying Georgia needs any more motivation for recruiting, but I think that Justice Terry recruitment last year was maybe a bit of a wake-up call. Like, hey, we really need to amp this thing up on all targets, whether they're leaning toward us or not, and now you're seeing Georgia do that.
I was talking to Jeff Santel, who covers Georgia for the AJC. At the press at Jared Curtis's announcement yesterday, and he was talking about Justice Terry. Him and Kaylee Manziel, daughter of our Rusty Manziel, were out there, and they were talking about how they went to Justice Terry's announcement, and he was in a red suit, and it was just tailored to perfection. And it's like, this dude got that suit because he thought he was going to Georgia. And I
maybe
think
a couple
even,
days before.
there was always confidence around Texas over the last couple weeks, if you remember me saying, like, there's confidence around Austin that they could close Justice Terry. I don't know if I believed it, but
there was confidence.
But Wednesday, he announced on Friday, if you remember, and around Athens on Wednesday, I think they still thought they were good for Justice Terry. But by Friday morning, I think Coach Trey Scott walked into the facility and was like, it's not going to happen, and then he obviously announced for Texas.
Well, the Dogs are off and running toward that number 1 class. UGA fans, talk to us. How you feeling after this commitment of Jared Curtis? Big weekend in Athens. Talk to us. All right, Steve, let's do a little quarterback dominoes because the number 1 domino, Jared Curtis, is headed to Georgia. So that leaves me with one simple question. Where does Oregon go next?
Well, the obvious answer is 5-star On3 Industry, 5-star Rider Lions. Now, Georgia had been recruiting Jared Curtis since he was a freshman, and I think in the end, those were some of the inches that added up that allowed Georgia to win the recruitment for Jared Curtis. Well, Oregon has been on Rider Lions since he was a freshman at Folsom High, one of the top dual-threat quarterbacks in the country. And I think that relationship, the way Oregon plays offensively, proximity to home, and just the excitement around the Ducks program. I moved my On3 RPM from USC to Oregon yesterday.
Yeah, that was a shocker.
Jared Curtis's announcement. And I'm talking to sources that Oregon and BYU are the top 2 for Rider Lions. Now, he's still going through his process. That doesn't mean USC couldn't slingshot back around to the top of the list, or it doesn't mean that Ole Miss or a Michigan or Ohio State, 3 other programs that he visited in the spring, can't become more relevant with official visits down the road. But I like where Oregon and BYU stand. I needed to move my prediction. And I'm riding with Dan Lanning, Will Stein in the Ducks for Rider Lions because I think that's the stage he could really see himself playing on, competing for championships. They're the Big Ten champs. The Big Ten was the best league in college football. Oregon won the regular season title. Ohio State won the national title. But Oregon's offense, the efficiency of the quarterback, the last couple quarterbacks have ranked among the most efficient quarterbacks in the country. They've been one of the most statistically prolific quarterbacks in the country. Bo Nix goes in the first round. Dylan Gabriel, ultimate leader, field general, goes in the 3rd round after being a Heisman finalist himself. Rider Lions, and Bo Nix was a Heisman finalist, so you got back-to-back Heisman finalists, elite offense. They're recruiting great players. Oregon, the backing of the program from an infrastructure standpoint, resources. I like where they're at. BYU, the family ties.
Can't rule it
obviously, the faith ties. He's going to take an LDS mission after his senior year of high school. They're very much in it in the program that Oregon's got to watch out for. But if Oregon lands Ryder Lyons, I'm not sure they take another quarterback in 2026 because you got Dante Moore. He could get you 2 more years.
Yeah, he could, yeah.
You got Novosad from Texas, who had a good end of spring camp.
Yeah, they're high on him.
And Moga, who is just like this outstanding athlete that runs 10-4, that's really developing as a quarterback, a guy that Oregon took a swing on because of his high physical upside. That could really pay off for them in the dual threat game and the way they play offense. And then you got, all 3 of those guys could return next year. And then you got Ryder Lyons coming in after that if he doesn't indeed choose
2027. All right, so looking at these top 10 quarterbacks, you got Jared Curtis off the board, Faison Brennan off the board, Keyshawn Henderson off the board, Ryder Lyons, Dia Bell off the board. We get to number 6 in Landon Duckworth, and he was a one-time South Carolina commitment whose stock has really risen. We thought maybe Georgia could turn in that direction if they missed on Jared Curtis. But what is Landon Duckworth's recruitment looking like? I know Ole Miss is involved. What's it looking like now that it kind of clears the way for his recruitment to really start going?
Well, I like where Ole Miss stands for Landon Duckworth right now. Talked to a source about his recruitment early or at the end of last week, and the Rebels are still in pole position for him. South Carolina is the program that I view as the biggest threat to Ole Miss right now because of the success they're having with Lenora Sellers, kind of the similar play styles that they have, and then the resources that South Carolina pours into. A few top targets cycle in and cycle out, but the visit to Ole Miss, the relationship, Jackson Dart, how he pushed into the first round, Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin, they're having the most success that they've had in program history, looking to build on that. They have the number 16 recruiting class in the country right now. They just landed on 300 running back Demarius Yates, a big pickup for them over the weekend. I like the way it's trending for Landon Duckworth right now for Lane Kiffin and company, but they're going to have to hold off the Gamecocks. They're going to have to hold off Florida State. He's got a long-standing relationship with Gus Malzahn. Georgia was in play. They're out. They're out of the game. And so you got Florida State, South Carolina, and Auburn. Auburn's the fourth program.
But that kind of shows how these QB dominoes work, right? Because we felt really good about Ole Miss heading into yesterday, but if Georgia misses – they're going to be a major factor for Duckworth. So Ole Miss probably took a little sigh of relief when Jared Curtis went to Georgia.
Right. So Georgia, they had 3 quarterbacks on deck.
Call, yeah.
Bo Bentley, who's the next quarterback
we're
that you want to talk about.
Number 7.
Landon Duckworth, who was going to take an official visit. And then Jaden O'Neal, the number 11 quarterback in the land per the On3 industry. But Georgia is out of the quarterback game. And I think the school that's most excited about that is Florida State.
Right.
Because they're in the mix for 2 of these guys right now. And they want to land a top target at the position. They're in the Landon Duckworth sweepstakes, but I would say their best chance of landing a quarterback right now is flipping Jaden O'Neal from Oklahoma.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these dominoes. So Landon Duckworth at 6. Bo Bentley now comes into play at number 7. We've talked a lot about LSU here.
Yeah.
Where do you see this shaping up?
Well, LSU's the program that's rising with Bo Bentley. Oklahoma is perceived as the favorite. That's who he grew up rooting for.
But they have a quarterback committed.
Jaden O'Neal. But I think that Coach Arbuckle, the first guy he offered when being hired at Oklahoma was Bo Bentley. Bo Bentley's already been there twice since Coach Arbuckle's been hired. He's been able to talk to Mateer, their quarterback transfer. I don't know if there was a program that had more pivotal pickups in the offseason than Oklahoma from getting Coach Arbuckle, who's an absolute stud, the way he carries himself. I talked to some coaches in that building that talked about the addition of Coach Arbuckle and how that is reinvigorating the program. And then Mateer, one coach over there at Oklahoma said he's as good as the guys we've had, and they've had some damn good ones, right? So, and there is no lack of swagger and confidence with Mateer. And Mateer was talking to Bo Bentley about playing against Brent Venables' defense in practice and how that is something that has helped elevate his game. He wasn't playing against Brent Venables' defense at Washington State in practice. So that was an exciting spring for him. The family connection, just the love for Oklahoma. They're in the driver's seat, but LSU, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, the Heisman trophies. If Joe Sloan's in the game, you don't have a better relationship from an offensive coordinator perspective from another school than Joe Sloan's going to have with the top target. So LSU rising fast, the way they develop quarterbacks, all the technology they have in that building that helps quarterbacks be their best version of themselves. They're obviously the threat for Bo Bentley in Oklahoma.
Okay, so Bo Bentley's at 7. Then we go to 8. Jonas Williams, he's locked into USC. Former Oregon commit. That domino fell about 6-8 weeks ago. Brady Smigel off the board to Michigan.
Florida State commit.
And then you got Jake Fetty.
People are trying to flip him.
Hard.
People like LSU, but Kenny Dillingham. I talked about the relationship that Joe Sloan has with top recruits from an offensive coordinator standpoint. Kenny Dillingham, he recruits his ass off from that head coach office, particularly with quarterbacks. So he is all in on Jake Fetty. They were early on Jake Fetty. We have Jake Fetty ranked higher than anybody on 3 in our rankings. And Arizona State, they got one of the top quarterbacks in the country right now in Sam Leavitt, who's going to be a Heisman candidate. They're off a college football playoff appearance. That's what they're looking to get back. They had Texas on the ropes. There's a lot of excitement around that program. I attended a spring practice at Arizona State this spring and saw all the juice and energy and the leadership that Sam Leavitt has. But they're all in on Jake Fetty, and he is locked in with the Sun Devils. That is a big pickup for them as they try and maintain their status in college football as a Big 12 powerhouse. They have the number 1 recruiting class in the Big 12 right now, and Jake Fetty is obviously the jewel.
Yeah. All right, we're not going to go too deep into these dominoes. I just want to leave the top 10 for a second and talk about Jaden O'Neal, who we've kind of hit on. What's going to be the catalyst here for Jaden O'Neal? Is it going to be maybe a Bo Bentley committing to Oklahoma to kind of back him off that commitment, or do you think he's on shaky ground as it stands now?
Well, I think Oklahoma's had to kind of repair some of that relationship a little bit with the way that they offered Bo Bentley and then had some recruiting weekend, had a big recruiting weekend that didn't include Jaden O'Neal, right? So, but Jaden O'Neal's in state now. He's at Mustang, Oklahoma. He continues to have dialogue with the Sooner staff and obviously has a lot of love for the school and the program and Brent Venables as a whole. And that was a big recruiting win for them when they landed him. But with them recruiting Bo Bentley, Jaden O'Neal is like, well, maybe I should see what else is out there. And there's some other schools that love him. Georgia was one of them. I thought that they were the biggest threat to Oklahoma following a spring visit. Now you have Florida State and Auburn, and I guess if I'm hedging, I would lean towards FSU now as the biggest threat to flip Jaden O'Neal from Oklahoma. And if I was playing out the dominoes and nothing's certain, my guess would still be today that Bo Bentley's a Sooner and Jaden O'Neal's a Knoll. But that doesn't mean it's gospel. So we'll see how it plays out.
Write that with pencil, not pen. Anything can change when it comes to quarterback dominoes. All right, let's talk a little Colorado because the Buffs had some blue chip recruits on campus this weekend. It was official visit weekend in Boulder. Deion Sanders in his 3rd year at Colorado. I can't believe it's already in his 3rd year.
They said it wouldn't happen.
They did. The
when
haters
Travis
said it
Hunter
happen.
and Shedeur Sanders leave, Deion will be gone. He'll be in the NFL. He'll be smelling the ocean somewhere. He would be done. But nope. He's still there. He's got his quarterback room in order with Caden Salter and then landed Julian Lewis from the trail. So if you got that position ripping and roaring, you feel good about your program, particularly if you're in the Big 12, which is, obviously the 4th ranked Power 4 conference in the country. But they had some really good players on campus this weekend. Sometimes when you send a tweet, you know that it's just going to rile up the Colorado haters. And so
you got him good this week?
Well, look, man, the number 3 running back in the country, KJ Edwards, was on campus, and he spent time with Marshall Faulk, the all-time former Colt.
He's got a gold jacket.
Yeah, former Ram, obviously, where he did a lot of damage, but we like to think of him as a former Indianapolis Colt at the Wiltfong house. Maybe the best all-purpose back of all time. Yeah, right. The way he could catch the football and do all the things. So he's the running backs coach at Colorado. Then you got Coach Prime, Deion Sanders in the corner office. KJ Edwards says, and I quote, "The coaches that are there have spent many years in the league, so they know what they're talking about and understand the game of football. And with Marshall Faulk coming in, RBU will be coming shortly to see you."
Okay.
And look, how could you say it won't? Certainly there's some great schools with great running back tradition. But man, there's so much hate for Colorado on social
right
media.
now, yeah.
And
they're feeding off of it.
The response, yeah. Like, but look, man, I don't think a lot of people even realize that Marshall Faulk is their running backs coach.
It was an off-season move. It was a little later than the regular coaching carousel, maybe, but they got a couple gold jackets in there.
Right.
Warren Sapp's there as well.
Yeah, Texas A&M, Texas are the schools that they're trying to make a move on. Baylor, SMU has been in there. But he had a great official visit to Colorado, and so did a lot of the other guys that were on campus this weekend. Jake Krull, the number 6 edge rusher in the land. They're battling Florida, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Texas for him. He talked about the energy in the building. Everybody was super nice. And again, talked about a staff full of NFL experience. Jace Matthews, the number 4 receiver in the country per on 3, was there. A lot of these kids love just the environment of Boulder. They see the mountains for the first time, the way it's looking over the stadium there. So they it's just a fabulous vibe. And then they get around the coaching staff, the energy around the program, just the excitement Coach Sanders has for the future and his staff. And he talked about how they're a school that gets wideouts to the league. So Jace Matthews liked it. The number 1 recruit in state, Deacon Schmidt, was on campus. We've talked to him a bunch after visits to Colorado, 4-star recruit. He says they're working on something very special. He loves all the O-line coaches. They're a great school, he said, and the environment is always a blast. Same goes with Brett Collegier. He plays at IMG Academy. He's a 4-star. He's a Colorado native. He talked about, the amazing energy, the charisma, of course. He said charisma, not me, but anytime Deion Sanders is around, charisma is one of the words that applies most to his personality. But they have 3 offensive line coaches, and he pointed towards that as well and just how they develop the position. The 2 offensive linemen are the ones that I would say Colorado has the best chance with. Yeah. I'm intrigued to see where it goes with Jace Matthews coming out of this. Jake Krull, probably a long shot. KJ Edwards, probably even a long shot. But just even the fact that they got him to campus, got him around Coach Faulk, showed him that potential. It was an exciting weekend, and Colorado, they're not done hosting blue chippers. It'll be a good summer for them as they bring in top talent, and we'll see who they really gain traction with. Yeah. Felix Ojo was there, but I don't see him at Colorado. Number 3 offensive tackle, number 4 player overall.
You like Texas for him?
I mean, I think I do like Texas, but you don't sleep on the Buckeyes.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, we will be talking a lot more Colorado as this cycle wears on. Big weekend out in Boulder. Let's talk a little Ohio State Buckeyes. That national championship hangover seems to be wearing off, and they are recruiting now. So over the weekend, a big win on the recruiting trail. Caden Dixon-Wyatt, modern-day wide receiver, commits to Ohio State. Brian Hartline continues to clean up at the wide receiver position.
Never a doubt with Coach Brian Hartline and his recruiting prowess, because of the way that he builds meaningful relationships with his top targets, but then the way that he prepares his receivers to not only be drafted high, but then be successful in the NFL. It seems like all of these guys are difference makers for their teams on Sunday and among the best players at the position in the league. And so from the trust that they have, the connection that they have with Brian Hartline, the offense, the prolific passing attacks since Ryan Day has been there, and then just the success that these guys are having when they get to the league, it's an easy sell. Oregon was a leader at one point for Caden Dixon-Wyatt, but Ohio State led all spring. He went back to Oregon just to make sure, but I am not surprised that he committed to Ohio State. He is in the fold for the Buckeyes. It's the number 3 class in the country. They got a shot to finish number 1.
They absolutely do. So who else are the Buckeyes in good shape with as we head into the summer?
Well, quite a few guys. I mean, when you just start at the 5 stars, you start with Felix Ojo. He's the number 4 player in the country, number 3 offensive tackle. I know the on-3 RPM favors Texas, but it seems like every cycle Ohio State goes into the Lone Star State and lands an elite player or 2, and Felix Ojo is target numero uno from Texas for Ohio State this cycle. Braylon Womack is the number 1 safety in the country. Ohio State is his leader. I should probably have an on-3 RPM to reflect that, knowing it can change. So stay tuned there. P.J. Dean, top 100 defensive lineman. I do have an on-3 RPM in favor of Ohio State, but Georgia, that's going to be a slobber knocker with Georgia. His brother goes to Georgia. A lot of excitement around the Georgia program for P.J. Dean as well. Sincere Johnson in favor of Key are two in-state targets that I have predicted to Ohio State. Sincere Johnson, one of the top 5 linebackers in the country. They're battling Alabama and Oklahoma for him. And then favor of Key on 300 running back, local kid. He's taking his official the first weekend of June. I have him on commit watch for that. Some other elite players going back to the 5 stars. Savion Hyder, he's the #1 running back in the country. Visited Ohio State in the spring, got to see a spring practice, get around Coach Lachlan and that staff. That was a big visit. They're battling Michigan, Georgia, and Tennessee, but they're certainly in the mix there. Derek Cooper is the #3 running back in the country. I think they're in the top 2 with Georgia for him. And then Carson Baker, I have predicted to Ohio State right now. So we'll see. Now he's 6'2", 200 pounds, and he can really run. So he's got as much upside as anybody at the position in this recruiting class. I like where the Buckeyes stand. We'll see how it shakes out with visits, see how it shakes out with Savion Hyder and Cooper, because I have a Key penciled into the class, and they're going to take 2 guys. Just a few others I want to mention, Josh. Drew Evers is a on 300 offensive lineman from Texas that I think Ohio State's in the top 2 or 3 for. They're going to have a great shot to land Luke Wafel, who's one of the most prized defensive end commits or defensive end prospects in this class. Penn State is in there. Texas is definitely in there, and USC's been rising. And then Jake Krull will be back for an official visit this summer. And then in the secondary, Jordan Thomas, Donovan Webb are a couple guys that they're in the middle of it for. So Ohio State, they're in the mix to finish with the #1 class. They're coming off a national championship. They had I don't know if a program like had a more electric spring on the recruiting trail with some of the guys that they landed, and they look to keep it rolling in the summer, and it's obvious that they will.
Yeah, coming off that natty, they got some momentum. Ohio State fans, hit subscribe because we are going to be talking Buckeye recruiting all summer long. You don't want to miss it. All right, let's get into some Penn State recruiting talk. 5-star corner Brandon Arrington headlined a big visit weekend for the Nittany Lions. Steve, what are you hearing coming out of this one?
Well, I think that Penn State still got some hill to climb with Arrington. Absolutely. But they got him to campus this weekend. He had a good visit. Really enjoyed being around the staff, the culture of the program, and sees why they're having so much success. They're coming off the Final Four appearance. They have a top 10 recruiting class. Yeah. I think Oregon, USC, Alabama, are some, and Texas A&M, of course, are firmly in that one. Penn State was kind of shooting their shot, Hail Mary this weekend.
As well.
There's a lot of guys that they are definitely in great shape for as they look to maintain a top 10 class, which I think is very promising. You know, they landed one of their top linebacker targets out of Virginia, Matthew Lama, yesterday, a 4-star. They beat Michigan, among others, for him. They're trending for in-state defensive lineman Alex Haskell, who's going to commit next week, I believe. I have an on-3 RPM in favor of him. And then you got some big names. And it starts at defensive end. They just had the top defensive end in the go off the board in the NFL draft in Abdul Carter. They've had some terrific defenses. It doesn't matter who the coordinator is under James Franklin. I think you and I could call the defense as long as Franklin's the head coach. They're going to be awesome on defense, and they certainly made a splash with taking Coach Knowles from Ohio State to be their defensive coordinator, replacing Tom Allen, who replaced Manny Diaz, who replaced Brent Pry. And so they've had the best defensive coordinator in college football, arguably year in and year out. They've had one of the most disruptive defenses in the country year in and year out. And so that's attractive to get 5-stars like Carter Meadows. I think Luke Wafel is going to finish a 5-star, so I'm just calling him a 5-star. Okay. But he's our #1 player in Jersey. He's number 18 player overall. Carter Meadows, number 6 player in the country for us. Penn State's in the top 2 or 3. If not up in pole position going into their summer official visits. And then offensive line. You know, they have Kevin Brown committed. He's the jewel of the class. They beat Notre Dame, among others, for him. They want to beat Notre Dame again for Grayson McHugh, who's a on 300 recruit. Marlon Bright, I have predicted to Penn State out of New Jersey. He's an on 300 recruit. And then Carter Scruggs and Leo Delaney are 2 more blue-chip offensive linemen. They have a great chance to land. And then Penn State, they seem to always boast one of the best secondaries in the land. two key targets. Kerry Adams, he's our number 3, or he's the On3 Industries number 6 cornerback. I believe we have him number 3. Kerry Adams, he's been there a bunch, including a recent visit this spring. Penn State's at the forefront of his recruitment. Then Joey O'Brien, he's the number 5 safety in the country per the On3 Industry. Penn State's recruiting him as a two-way guy. So they like him at safety. They like him at receiver. His latest visit, they showed him that plan. It was real exciting. My On3 RPM's on Notre Dame.
Right.
But Penn State could very much land Joey O'Brien. And with those names that we just listed, a top 10 class is very much in the cards for a program that is going to be in the national title discussion again, particularly with what they bring back on offense, what they've done in the transfer portal. They should be potent. Drew Aller should take another step forward in his progression as a player. So they're going to be a team to watch on the field, and they're going to be a program to watch on the recruiting trail this summer.